Here's a question for my fellow dungeon masters, my fellow D&D DM enthusiasts. We talked about, and I pushed up to the channel here a little while ago, Session 0, this idea of exploring the different character classes and having that roundtable discussion with your players regarding the character classes that they want to play. And of course, there are lots of approaches to take. My approach as a dungeon master is I want you to have agency over your character. I want you to become involved. I want it to be literally your personality, your avatar on the table. So I'm open, and most of the time this works out. I say most of the time because occasionally a power gamer, a meta gamer causes a little bit of trouble, but you can play any type of character you want. With that approach, though, I was asked in a recent game, one of the players wanted to play a vampire. How would you begin to handle that? Now, this wasn't a world where vampires were, say, a playable class or a standard class one would play. What I mean by that is a vampire openly walking around and being accepted. There are D&D universes where that happens, or custom homebrew universes. And this wasn't an example of a game where the players are deliberately doing something different than the standard party, meaning like examples from a game that I played, there was this series of adventures. It was kind of a mini campaign. We were going to go from level 1 to level 5. And the players were all going to play apprentice magic users, apprentice mages. Now, how that played out, sorcerer versus mage, different configurations, different specializations, I left that up to them. But the idea was they were part of a mage's college going to become accepted under a great master. So they had to prove themselves. And the early adventures were kind of fetch and deliver and later on recover artifacts and finally utilize magic in some interesting duels. So sometimes you play a game where the characters are very, very focused and specific. You might be playing a group of orcs or a group of goblins, kind of pushing it through from that direction. But back to the generalized party, because that's not the focus of what this was. The player wanted to play a vampire. Now, in D&D, the current edition, there's a neat matrix where you can essentially have a custom class. You can pull something out of the monster manual. You can invent something yourself. And the attributes are kind of generic, and you get some bonuses, and you play around. Technically, you could create a custom, like, vampire fledgling type class. But some of the natural abilities of being blooded as a vampire, those wouldn't be available. So now as the DM, you're kind of looking and saying, well, without getting into really custom stuff, if we're just talking base player's handbook, how do you bring a vampire in? Because the challenge rating of the party to the challenge rating of the other players, is that going to skew things a little bit? Likewise, vampires are pretty powerful, drawing from the monster manual. So kind of back and forth. I take the approach of we can totally work that out. We can figure that out. But the bigger question, so I would say yes. Let's see what we can do. Let's see what you can play. The bigger question, though, is you can play any character class that you want, but based on the realm that we're playing, and I'm always up front, hey, we're in generic Mysteria, we're in Forgotten Realms, we're in like Fritz's homebrew world, here's the background history. By being a player, a character there, you'd know what's going on. You'd have an idea. So it's not like you get into the game and you realize, magic is like not trusted and really powerful and you'll be hunted down. No, like, or kind of the generic D&D approach. Magic is everywhere. Magic is essentially technology, so wizards aren't given a second look. I say that jumping in as a vampire, you as a player would have to be aware, these are the rules for the game. So, or I shouldn't say rules. There are no rules in D&D. The guidelines, the suggestions for the game, if you reveal that you're a vampire, there could be some problems, depending on the faction, depending on what's going on. Likewise, if you reveal you're a vampire, there might be some advantages. It might open some doors in certain places. I would look to them. I would look to you to roleplay that, or a league, because D&D is a role-playing game. So from that perspective, I turn it over to my fellow dungeon masters and D&D enthusiasts. One of your players comes to you and says, I want to play a vampire. We're starting out at level 1. We're going to go to level 8. I want to try out a vampire. How do we do that? How do you make that work? Do you allow them? Do you allow them to do that?